This is the Comedy Kiosk, podcast by Monday and Munoz. Please welcome Monday and Munoz.
Hello and welcome to the Comedy Kiosk, a podcast in which we discuss news, opinions, and ideas about comedy. My name is Igor Monday.
And I'm David Munoz.
And today I will be kind of interviewing David actually, because we will mostly be discussing his maybe not first, but his kind of first real hour of all of the jokes he's come up with during the last 8 years of performing, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
And at the same time, his farewell show, his last and final show in Russia before moving out to Spain. So,
sort of. Yeah. Sort of.
Are you
Doing
any more shows?
Yeah, well, no. See, the thing, this is why I didn't call it a final show. I said last show in Russia, but technically, because the reason why I didn't say, like, the actual name of it wasn't like the last show or the farewell show or anything like that, because as I'm married to a Russian, there's a very good chance that I'm going to come back here on some, holiday to visit, like, for example, the mother-in-law and the brother-in-law, we could come back here, things like that. So there is a good chance that I may visit maybe like in 2 years or 3 years, or hopefully when things are a bit, how to put it, calmer, maybe, when maybe certain issues have have been resolved, maybe, hopefully, and then, maybe it might be a little bit, chiller, cooler to come visit. Anyway,
I like how diplomatic you're trying to be, considering you are still there, and that's a very wise thing to do. But also, I think that
although by the time this gets broadcast, I won't be. So at the same time, I do kind of feel like saying fuck it all and just saying, well, when the shit is stop hitting the fan and these people get their fucking shit sorted, that'd be great. Could visit again.
Yeah, but broadcast is one thing, but you still need to leave that country. So.
Yeah, that is true. But at this point, that's why I called it the Greatest Hits Volume 1. Because when I come back, I could do a Greatest Hits Volume 2. So the stuff I didn't get to do, I can do the rest of it. Also at the same time, if there's newer bits that, I can perform, whatever. So that's why I called it David Munoz Greatest Hits Volume 1, sort of like an album that a band would release, sort of thing. Because that's what it kind of felt like. I was just going through the greatest hits that I've collected over the last 8 years. Not all of them, but some of them. Volume 1.
Yep, and maybe then let's chat a bit about the lead up to this. Mm-hmm. So both from kind of the history of your, like stand-up and how it all came together, all this material over the course of how many years was it written, where it was performed up until now and everything, and we mentioned this several times over like previous 50 episodes or whatever we do have at this point. Yeah. But maybe someone is just tuning in and they're not so familiar with your kind of whole history of like from your first open mic up until your first The Greatest Hits Volume 1 show. So maybe in just a few minutes, in few sentences, like give us a breakdown of some most important milestones during that journey, how it all came to be.
Okay. All right. So first show was not an open mic, as you're aware. It was an actual gig for a magazine and a magazine launch because they did it every month. They had like a variety show, bands, poets, jugglers, anything and everything. It was just like for that night, there'd be probably like 5 performances, whatever. I was one of them. So my first gig of stand-up was basically meeting a guy who's at a dinner party, basically a guy who thought I was hilarious and told amazing stories, and pretty much invited me, and then I got given 30 minutes. So that was my introduction, and I had 2 weeks to prepare.
This was back in Australia, right?
Yeah, exactly. So then I did it.
What was the year?
Good question. I think 2010, maybe?
2010, so 13 years ago.
Something like that, maybe? Yeah. Yeah. Oh, God, I knew it. I knew it the other day because I actually still have the email, and I remember I found it ages ago, and it still had my comedy bit because I had written it out, and I think I'd sent it or something. Anyway, so, I actually have the original bit somewhere saved.
Has anything from that set made it to your greatest hits?
No, not anything.
No, okay.
Not a thing.
Makes sense.
I wouldn't mind kind of going through it again. Actually, I wouldn't mind sending it to you and seeing what you think about it.
Sure.
You probably, I know the first thing you'd say, there's no punchlines. Yep. pretty much. But, it's the first time. But still, I think you might appreciate the ideas and you might be like, all right, I could actually see some potential here, but like obviously needs a lot of workshopping.
I actually found some notes I made way before I ever started doing stand-up, because for a long time before I started doing stand-up, I had an idea of I would like to try doing stand-up.
Yeah.
And then sometimes I would come up with some, what would be funny? It would be funny to talk about that thing,
Yeah.
and I would kind of write it down somewhere. And recently, like a month ago or something, I was back home and I went through like an old hard drive and I found some notes that I made back then. And that's kind of, I don't know, same 2010, 11, 13, something like that, before I started in 2014 actually doing stand-up. And a lot of that stuff is very different than comedy I do now.
Yeah.
Because once you get into stand-up, you kind of know what works and what doesn't. And you feel too comfortable doing things that you're not sure will work. So you kind of go with the, oh, guess what I noticed in the metro yesterday, and this kind of stuff, But a lot of ideas and concepts I had back then were stuff that I would like to do now. Again, after 10 years of performing, I would like to now do that kind of stuff. It's just, kind of, what is the difference between, I don't know, politics and medicine? Well, just simple kind of comedy. But
are you saying that you were more avant-garde then or now?
I was more, I think, because then I didn't really understand how it works and what would and what wouldn't get laughs. I was ready to kind of risk it all and go for something that it might kill or it might bomb.
Yeah.
Well, now I'll look for that kind of safe middle, and I'll go with something that I know will get laughs, even though it's not comedy gold, it's just entertaining.
Yeah.
But back then I was like, I didn't know how it all works. So I was just like, oh, this is funny to me. I was writing stuff that's funny to me.
Yeah.
And now I'm writing stuff that I think will be funny to others.
Yeah. Okay, well, maybe that's something you can look into for future. You can be like, all right, I'm going to do a set, a whole bunch of stuff, all based on that, and then let's see how it goes. Like, as you don't know, you might find a new voice, something that's not being done in a way, Maybe that person had more, had less fear in a way, had more chutzpah or whatever you call it, or balls, whatever,
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So you did the 30-minute set at the kind of local variety show, and then after that, if I remember correctly, there was a pause of like 3-4 years,
something like that. Yeah, before I found pretty much you guys in Moscow. Like, I had given up the idea of ever doing stand up again. I've explained there were like some opportunities that I screwed up, but anyway, I ended up in Moscow. I was looking through Facebook expat events, and this thing popped up. And at the time, I was dating this girl, and I suggested it as like a date night thing for us to check out. But also, it was for me to check out what the scene was like. And I was expecting it to be kind of very bad, and so I went. And you could tell it was a bunch of guys who were just starting. But I did like it, and I did like they were like, trying weird things, interesting things at the beginning. And I remember we walked away from it, and, she had her favorite, I had my favorite, and, of the night. But I met the guys, I met some of them. You went there that night, but it was a couple of others. And I think it was Foreman, Yarvitz, and maybe Dennis Nikolai, I think it was at the end. I think it was the three of them that I talked to that night, and there were some other comedians there, one or two others, and they said, yeah, sure, join us, come blah, this and that. I think it was a few weeks later that I ended up, or maybe a month later, I ended up going to Jim and Jack's, and then I started doing open mics there. But the difference being, in the beginning, I would only do open mics maybe once a month or once every couple of months when I was inspired. I never repeated the same set. I always did something new every time I came. And I didn't get up and repeat. I had like a story, and then it was like, okay, that one's done. Now, next story or next thing. Okay, did that one. Okay, that's done. So I probably did it, I don't know, 4 to 6 times before I went to Spain. I left. I think I did it about 6 times or so. And then a year, I didn't do anything in Spain. And when I came back, that's kind of the deal that I had with my then girlfriend. It's a different girl. The deal I made about coming back to Russia was like, right, but this time I want to go do stand up every weekend. Like, I want to take a serious hit at it. That was kind of the thing. Like, I wanted to do regular, and I wanted to do bits again and again and sharpen them and all the rest. And I said, that's part of the deal of me coming back. Like, I was like, because we just started dating and I didn't know what her reaction would be. I was like, look, I just don't want anyone to tell me, you can't do that, you're not spending enough time with me. Like, that sort of thing. Because the previous one had not exactly done that, but it was kind of implied, if you know what I mean? Like that whole like, oh, do we have to go? I don't like the people. I don't want to do that. You know, it's like, oh, it's boring. And I'm like, but I want to do it. And then you end up not doing it because the person's like, ah. So I was like, you know, I don't care. You can stay home. You don't have to come, but I'm going. Turns out she actually ended up really liking comedy as well and getting into it, and pretty much is one of my best critics. And will really help me out.
Best critics. That's good.
Yeah.
I think I remember seeing you, because I don't think we met maybe the first time you did shows with us, but like second, third, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know where I was at that point, but I remember first time seeing you, I wasn't performing, because usually in those shows I would host a lot or I was performing, but then at least once a month I would just sit in the audience, not perform, not host, not anything, just to see the acts and to see how it looks from an audience member point of view.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing you like that. And I was sitting in the front row, and you were doing your bit about your girlfriend taking you to buy skinny jeans.
Oh, yeah.
And there was something with towels as well, like showering and drying with a towel after a shower, something like that. I don't remember much, but I remember I was in the front row for that, like, I don't know, half a meter away from your crotch, and you very kind of, you know, very vividly gesticulate all those motions and everything as you usually do. Yeah. And I was like, this guy's fun. Like, I remember that was my first kind of, this guy's fun. Yeah. Because a lot of us would at that point just kind of hide behind the mic stand. Yeah. And then just like stand there, tell jokes. Mm-hmm. Like, people didn't have a lot of stage presence or confidence even to do that, to, you know, kind of to act something out, to, you know, to be themselves on stage, to be like creative, to be like physical and all of that. And I remember thinking like, this guy's fun. That was my first kind of, and that's a compliment, because for a lot of people that performed on that stage, my first thought was like, this guy's a cunt. So
what a boring motherfucker.
Yeah, or that, or like, this guy's shit, or this girl. But and so I guess that time when you returned, you kind of started, and you haven't stopped since then. Yeah. In the meantime, you also added Spanish like a year and a half ago. Yeah. When we launched, Sergio launched in our club the Spanish nights. Yep. At least once a week, I think it was in the beginning. Uh-huh. So you got involved in that, and I guess you've been doing.
Yeah, it's ebb and flowed, you know, sometimes, especially with my last job, it really kind of ebbed quite a bit. But, you know, I've tried to keep it at least, you know, at least once a month sort of stuff. Sometimes I can get it up to 2-3 times, you know, with work and stuff like that. But yeah, it's ebb and flowed, but it's been kind of, you know, pretty consistent. I've stayed within the scene. I've been doing stuff, and I haven't let it go sort of stuff. I'm still doing it. And yeah, so, and at the end, I would say, I decided that when I was leaving, because, you know, yourself, Oleg, everyone was doing this, you know, before you leave, you do this farewell show. I knew it wasn't farewelling 100%, but I wanted to do a greatest hits, and especially bits that I wanted to kind of not retire, but sort of semi-retire the Russian bits, the bits that only really work in Russia or in Slavic countries, things like that, that outside, I'll either have to rework the jokes completely to make them work, or I will just have to construct new ones, or just let them go, you know, just pretty much like, right, this takes too long to explain and set up to finally get to the funny part. Like, screw that. Like, I just won't use it. Yeah, I'm sure I can come up with similar stuff based on Spanish food, maybe. But, you know, right now, Russian food is just akroshka. How the hell? Холодец, kvass, kefir. I mean, some of them now, kefir apparently is becoming a thing in Western Europe. Like, it's become the new, you know, fucking Yakult's stomach digestive milk product. But other than that, it's like kvass. What the hell is kvass? Холодец. I can try to explain it. I think the explanation would be funny, but honestly, I will need a projector. There is no way I can do those jokes without a projector to show different, and then it becomes more like a TED Talk in a way. Maybe a very funny TED Talk, but it will require props.
Yeah, I mean, in general, I would consider those bits, and I consider my bits that are kind of very closely tied to life in Moscow, in Russia, all those kind of things, cultural things, language, food, this kind of stuff, locations like, oh, this metro station, that city, and so on. Like all those references don't mean jack once you leave the country, but I still can't say that I consider them like 80% retired, because I think in some places now there is like regular like Russian stand-up in Belgrade, in Barcelona, in Istanbul, in Berlin, in Tel Aviv, and I'm sure that English stand-up is also attended by large groups of kind of Eastern Europeans, and not only Russian speakers or Russians themselves, but every Polish person will understand, or every even Croatian person will understand Haladec's jokes, because we have Hladetina, which is kind of the same thing. It's slightly like the spices are different and stuff, but it's a kind of frozen meat jelly kind of thing. And so there is still a big part of Europe, at least, or even the world, where people would get those references. Or if you can set it up in a very brief way, like Russell Peters or someone who does a lot of like cultural humor and differences between cultures and languages. He always, I don't know that much about Sri Lankan food, but he sets it up in like one sentence and then he goes into the joke.
Yeah, exactly.
So I consider that like the same bits of mine, like 80% retired. But, if a chance present itself, I could bring those back and kind of, I think they would work well.
Yeah.
But so before we talk about the show itself and how it went on the day, maybe you can give us a bit of the background on the kind of how did you put this show together, and what is like how old is the oldest joke? How old is the newest joke? How, like, I don't know, how many times did you do like all these jokes before that day? Like, is there a joke that you've just tried a week before and said, okay, this is going into the best of, or are they all jokes that you've done like 1,000 times?
Okay, to the setup to it and everything. Mainly, I asked Abed, who's now that I'm leaving is going to be the eldest statesman of comedy, of English comedy in Moscow. Because literally, we realized this. Actually, we were sitting down. I'm like, wait, I'm the oldest guy here, because everyone else left. No one else is there now, except for maybe Nikolai, technically, who used to host at Jim and Jack's, but I haven't seen him around at all, really. So, and he's not involved in the scene as such. He just pops in every so often and does a set once in a blue moon. So,
I think he's alive, but he's not doing stand-up anymore. But I think he's still working.
Really, I was the last regular, and now it's going to be Abed. So anyway, Abed, basically, he asked me a couple of questions at the beginning, like how do I want it to do it, this and that. And the main thing was, because when you did your farewell, which room did you do it in?
I did Stand Up Brothers.
Right, you did the Stand Up Brothers, right, yeah. Okay, so that was an all right venue as well. I had a kind of a similar idea where I didn't want a huge hall. I didn't want, for example, a big room that could seat 100 people, because I thought, I don't think I can get 100 people to come to my show. And then you'll end up with a lot of dead air and space. So I ended up going with the place Stand Up Cafe, which has it has the main hall where the big performers go and a lot of the Russian stand-up do. And then they have that little room, which is made with like a little tables and a little bar and everything. And it can seat technically 38. It has 38 chairs. And they can add a couple of more chairs. So I think maybe we got up to 42 or something like that. Yeah, so I would rather have a smaller, more intimate, because what I realized is when we did the Champion of Comedy, competition, the semi-finals we did there. The ones pre. And then the semi-finals and the finals we did in the big room. And it was harder to get the laugh, even though the material we were saving, it was great stuff. But it died out. The laughter died out, sort of thing. While in the smaller rooms, it seemed to bounce and reverberate around the room a lot better. So, it's this idea of, big fish, little pond, like medium fish that seems like a big fish because it's in a little pond. It was like that. I was like, yes, I want that for the show. I would rather have, a packed room. Okay, not everybody can come, but it's packed. And the laughs will bounce around. And that's what we did. So that was the strategic plan there. Then when it came to my jokes, like I said, I was mainly aiming for the Rush stuff, but I ended up breaking. I thought, okay, this is going to be my kind of farewell. So I'm going to talk about me. I'm going to talk about Australia. So I had the Australian bits that I have, some Australian bits that I did also for the semis, and some animals. And I chose the best ones that I had for that I thought were the most animated, fun stories. And I actually ended up throwing an extra one in there on the night, spur of the moment, not planned. I just went, fuck it, I'm including this because I like the setup to it. Because it kind of sets up the other two animal jokes even better. I think it makes them stronger. So I did the slightly weaker one, but it builds up. And then I had all bits about Russia, and I had a bits about like learning the language, well, students speaking in English, then me trying to learn some Russian, and then I go into the few main stories about observations and things that have happened in Russia. I ended up changing the structure a little bit. I ended up actually going first with the English and Russian language, and I had 2 bits for each one, 2 strong bits, because I thought they're easy. They're the relatable ones. Everyone can relate straight away with that, because the vast majority of the people there have learnt English, and the few others that haven't, it's because they teach English. So I'm like, this is going to get the audience on board. So that was my opening bits. They were the bits that I could build the rapport. We were laughing at each other, and at the end, the last 2 bits is basically, the last bit is me screwing up the Russian language. So that allows everyone to laugh at me. And I thought that's a good way to start. We start with build rapport, build a camaraderie, laugh at me. Yes, I'm an idiot. I did a stupid mistake with Russian, blah, blah, blah. I suck at this language. And then I went backwards in a way back to Australia. Okay, so I'm from Australia. Let me tell you a bit about myself. Da. And then I talked about Australia, the animals, things like, because I introduced this to all my students, ask me, why did you come to Russia? Okay, why? Because Australia's like this is this and this, and hence I wanted to move on to the next stage. So I did the Australian animals. They always get a good laugh because it's interesting, it's fascinating for non-Australians and all the rest. They're fun stories. I started with the octopus story because it sets up the whole how dangerous Australia is. Then I go into the most animated dangerous one I have, the snake story with my mother attacking the snake. I've got the bits called Ninja Mum. So, she does her thing there. It's fun. And I even did that one better because now I've brought this Bruce Lee element. I've super exaggerated it. So it's very entertaining. Everyone was loving it. Engaged like hell. Then I go into the kangaroo story, which is probably the oldest bit, I would say, is the kangaroo story. You probably saw that bit when I was performing, like the towel bit and the... what was the other bit that you mentioned?
The kangaroo story is about like a picnic and a sandwich.
Yes. And that was one of the first. That's a story that's older than my stand-up career. I've been telling that at barbecues and things, and I used to tell that to girls if I wanted to, seem like a funny guy or whatever. That was one of my cheesy little funny stories that, you tell people, they go, you're a funny fella. And it used to be a story that people would later on then go, have you ever thought about doing stand-up? Like it was one of those. So it's probably, I would say that's probably one of my original stand-up bits, I wouldn't be surprised if that was one of the stories I told at that dinner. Can't remember which ones it was, but I wouldn't be surprised if that was one of them. So that's the part where I end with the Australian animals. I finish with the kangaroo bit. This time, even though I'd done it so many times, because I didn't have the pressure of time, because I had a whole hour and a bit, I ended up kind of really, really easing into it. I really played it out. I let my pauses sit. And I think that was it. Like I felt like I was on top of it. And that was when I was telling that story. Like Ninja Mum was great. That really put me in the mood, in the groove. And then when I got to the kangaroo, that's where I'm like, I found my pace. I found my rhythm. And I wasn't rushing. And I did my bit and it went really well. Really, really well, I felt. Then I finished that bit off like, okay, so I finished that level. Like, I survived Australia. Next level, Russia. Take it up another notch. Move to Russia. And then I go with the stereotype. So then from there, I went into, I think I went into Dill and Dutcher. My Dill and Dutcher bit, the double Ds. So I got that. Because it's talking about stereotypes of Russia.
Dylan Dutcher sounds like some kind of detective. Dylan Dutcher.
yeah. So I did that bit, and in there was a little. Okay, so there was a new bit, not new, but it's an expanded bit that I hadn't done in a while because of the situation that we're in. One cannot criticize anything, but I threw it in there. At the end of the dacha bit, there is definitely it alludes. I don't expressly say it, but it definitely alludes. And I got a really good like laugh from people where I talk about the kind of the corruption and the whole palace and stuff like that in this situation. Anyway, so that throws in there. From Dylan Dacha, I believe I then went into Russian food after the dacha. Russian food, classic bit. Russians love it. Everyone can relate to it. And then finally, my last story, I went into my story about my prostate, and yeah, and that
sounds like a final story to me.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And the best thing about it is because all the other ones, by then everyone is super comfortable. That when I start going on about it, it's a bit.
Wait, is it the one about the suppository?
Yes. So that's exactly. It's all about the suppository at the end. But yeah, so this is the final bit that I did because by then talking about something, if I do that bit at the beginning, I did that for the final, remember? And then I went first, and that bit was it was a bit too personal. People are like, yeah, we don't want to hear about this. As the first comedian, it's too in your face, not literally, but yeah.
Yeah, I think that's actually when you're building, because now you've built that hour, you kind of understand and you've done it once. So you maybe, and I hope you recorded it as well.
Yeah.
So you maybe have like a better idea because, whatever you've done this time doesn't mean you have to do it like that every time. Because I think I've done my hour as it is now, and the show that I took to the Melbourne Festival and I'm taking to Fringe next month and so on. It's in terms of material, it's like 70% the same show I did as my farewell show or the best of show as well when I was leaving.
Yeah.
But the structure and the order is way, way, way different.
Yeah.
And now it works like a show.
Yeah.
Then it worked like a compilation of jokes.
Yeah.
So it was just like a bunch of jokes, a bunch of bits that all work in like 10-minute sets.
Yeah.
So it was like 6 10-minute sets put together.
Yeah.
It was kind of like that.
Yeah.
And somewhere it connected well, somewhere it didn't.
Yeah.
And somewhere I really feel like, if I left that second 10 for the last 10, it would be a great last 10. But it was a meh second 10.
Yeah.
Because it just doesn't fit and they don't know you that well and they don't see why you're talking to me about this now.
Exactly.
And all these kind of things. So now finally after I did it then for the first time, and then since then I've done it in Zagreb, in Istanbul, in Vilnius, in Berlin twice, in Melbourne like 4 times and so on. And now I have it as a show.
Yeah.
And now as a show, it finally has, a beginning, middle, and the end.
Exactly.
Before that, it was a compilation of jokes. And I think when you do that first show, which is I think for most comics, their first full show is just the greatest hits or compilation of sets, like club sets. Because if I look at, for example, Mark Normand, whose first special was that self-release special on Netflix he did during the pandemic, I think. It's basically a compilation of his club sets. All of those jokes have been done previously on, I don't know, the Late Show, the this and that, like the Conan, whatever. Yeah. And I've seen all those bits before. It's just that now they have been put together into one show. Yeah. It's a great show, but it doesn't seem like a show. It seems like the best of, the greatest hits, as you said.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing is, technically, now the thing I forgot to mention earlier was, this isn't my first big show. It is the first hour long or hour and a bit. But I did do the Siberian show in 2019, which was 45 minutes. And that was my first time doing like a big set. 45 minutes of just me. And I had 2 openers and it was me coming on. And I had 45 minutes and I did my bit. And there was a lot of the Australian animals and it was more geared towards that. And I believe Russian food was in there as well. So that was like the first time I tried this. And like you said, the first time there was a general structure, but it was much more logically linear in the sense of, I start from Australia, get to here, now I'm in Russia, this is what I'm noticing. Here I played with it differently because I didn't go with necessarily the logical order, I went with the artistic order, hence the more psychological order. It's like, okay, let's build rapport Let's do language stuff that we can all relate to. Now, what I want to do is I want to introduce my background. Okay, fair enough. We're doing that. Now here, I start kind of going into why I moved to write. So I'm giving it a bit more themes and meanings, flow. So I made sure I made it flow. Like what I find is you can do these greatest hits, but what ends up becoming more important is not the jokes, but it's the links. How do you link it together? How do you make it flow? And how do you make it that by the end you feel like you've gone on a journey, that you've gone on an obvious trip from point A to point B with twists and turns in the middle, but it flows. You are going in a general direction and you can feel it to the point where you finally reach the waterfall, let's say, where you just over and you crescendo this big thing and it smashes at the bottom and there's a huge cloud of water and waves. And I don't know if this metaphor is working because it sounds like I'm also like collapsing and failing dismally. And then we crash and then we die and then it all goes to shit. And we're hanging on by a thread with broken limbs at the bottom or lying on rocks. Oh, it's horrible. No, I do mean it is a beautiful waterfall where it cascades down and it just looks like bang. You're like, wow. So that's what I was trying to build at. And hence, I was really building, and then I even had callbacks. And the one thing I regret is I kind of left things a bit last minute. So I included one or two little bits so there's one bit about the language where it's called Make the Sex. And you might have remembered it from the St. Petersburg festival that we did, where, the guy says, last weekend I make the sex. And it's like, wait, what? You make the sex? Like, not just any sex, the sex, and you make it. Like, please explain to me, how do you do this? And I have all this sort of stuff. And then later on, when I introduced the Rush bit, I can't remember exactly how I did it, but I linked it back and I had one of the people say, yes, we make the sex. And when I did that, boom, got a laugh because I'd done the same thing like 15 or 20 minutes earlier. I'd referenced it. So I was doing a callback. And I had people later on tell me like, that callback, that was cool. It linked, it made it all link. Like, as in, I've made it flow. And that was the point. When I did the ending, it had to reach this crescendo where when I finally got to the bit about my prostate, everyone's comfortable, everyone's been laughing, and now they're willing to really laugh at me, to like not care how personal I get and just like laughing about it. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the kind of, the important thing is to learn how to build that different material, because it wasn't written as a show. No. It was written as jokes, then turned into bits, then turned into sets, and then those sets put together they kind of put together in a way of kind of a Frankenstein monster, just various sets that don't necessarily wanted to be together in the same show, in the sense that and I felt it the same, because like I have 10 minutes that's very lighthearted and fun, like ha ha ha, dating as a foreign. The next 10 minutes dark, like dark or like heavy, or like makes you think and stuff. And I'm like, that doesn't work if that follows that. It's big. It's too big of a jump for people to comprehend that. Okay, we should still laugh at this. So it's kind of how you build and how you, especially when you're doing it with pre-existing sets. Because if you're writing a show, okay, I'll just write 50 new minutes. Then you can have like a leitmotif that goes through that show, and you will then build it as you want to build it. But if you're just patching things together from like various sets and everything, then and the other thing also, though, I have to say, the one not advantage that I have, but one thing that I am aware that I've realized recently that I tend to do this. I always like to have themes when I do stand-up bits. Like, I notice a lot of comedians will get up and they'll just hodgepodge together, even for their 5 minutes or for their 10 minutes. They'll hodgepodge little bits and they'll jump from one thing to another. I tend to stick to a theme. So it's like, okay, tonight I'm going to do my bits about technology. And it's all about technology. So all of a sudden I have a whole bunch of today it's about me being old. I'm going to do all that, feeling old and blah, blah. Okay, this bit is all about me, about sex. So this is all the sex stuff that I have. And I tend, when I perform, I realize, and even from the very first show, that first 30 minutes, I've always tried to have a theme, like a through line that goes through my bits. So when I'm setting it up, I find then all I need to do is connect these through lines. And I do find it makes it a little bit easier, because then it's actually a bit like, okay, Australian animals, fine. I've got 5 different bits. Okay, I'm only going to do 2. What are my 2 best? I can actually start dropping things. Yeah, I mean, that's the good Well, the good thing about making a set, building a set like that, is because then you kind of stick to the topic, and people's mind doesn't have to like jump from this to that, and you can also understand kind of, you yourself can remember jokes easier because they all follow the same theme and everything. I think in terms of like building a show like that, then it's maybe a little bit trickier because you have those, it's visibly blocks, you know, like, okay, it's 12 minutes of sciencey stuff, then 10 minutes of relationships, then 12 minutes on food. Like, it's very blocky.
That's
well.
true. That's what I'm saying. The links end up becoming the more important part, because it's like, if you can't link them well enough, if you can't build a good link with, you know, maybe a couple of quips and jokes in between, like to link it, if you can't do that, that's when you notice the total block. It's like, no, it's not working, buddy. It's like, wait, that's a jump.
Yeah, and then before we get onto the show itself and your impressions and how did you feel doing it, etc. So how long did you end up doing, by the way?
Honestly, I think I did about an hour 15, maybe something like that. At least an hour for sure. We ended up starting a little bit smidge late. And I had to finish like a couple of minutes before the 9 o'clock. Abed opened, but he actually did very short. I think he did about 5 minutes worth of material, if that. He kind of jumped straight to, here's your guy Dave sort of thing. So I think about a little bit over an hour.
And how much more material do you think you could like put together now? So not using that hour, like how
Volume
many more
2
jokes that are. Yeah, well, not necessarily volume 2, but like out of the remaining material that you can put together as a set, or not necessarily a show, as a set. Like how much more do you have? 20 minutes?
Man,
another 60
I had
minutes?
backup just in case, because I know me, and I know, like, remember that final where I had 20 minutes worth of material? I got through it in 8 because I just machine gunned the fucker. Well, I was worried I was going to do the exact same thing again. And then even if I caught myself, I would have like truncated my show by like 10 minutes or 20 minutes. And I'd be like, oh crap. Like, I'd get to the end of my prostate bit, be like, thank you very much, everybody. Walk off stage, and Abed would be there going, dude, you got 20 more minutes. Get back up, finish, encore, you know, sort of thing. So I had my Richard story and my koala story as 2 backups. I had 2 backups, Richard and koala. So they're 2 bits that I didn't include. When it came to English language, there were a couple of bits. I didn't do Gary Potter. So Gary Potter is another bit that I did not include. I didn't do the Flying Fox Dracula bit. I didn't do, what are the other animal bits? Oh, already mentioned koala. Yeah, so I didn't do those ones.
You didn't do, I presume, you didn't do your sex material.
Oh, sexual fantasies? I don't know if I would include that as my greatest hits, although it is one of my first hits. It was probably the first hit that I really kind of did a good show with properly. Yeah, if I punched it up, if I redid that a little bit, then sexual fantasy another. I could probably do another hour, actually. Now that I think about it, I could probably pull out another hour. And there's newer bits that I wouldn't call them greatest hits yet, but they definitely got some good potential in there too, because I got this technology bit. There's a couple of bits in that I could definitely bring out. There's a couple of other bits. So yeah, I could probably do another hour. Yeah.
This is something that, I mean, we haven't shared a stage in over a year. I think the last show we did together was maybe the finals of that competition, which was something like February last year, January last year, maybe even. So yeah, over a year and a half that we haven't done a show together or seen each other perform, I presume, besides some clips here and there. And that's actually because all of these things that you mentioned that you did this time in your greatest hits, like it's the joke. And we did chat before that, and you shared your set list and everything. And even if I don't know it by name, I'm sure I know it by the story or by the theme or something. So I think I'm quite familiar with all of those, and I'm quite familiar with this second hour that you also now mentioned all of those jokes, because it is really the greatest hits. It's the jokes you've done the most and that kind of almost always work and everything. But I'm actually very curious to see your new, like what you've done what you've written and you know, practiced in the last year or so, because I think what I've added to my show in the last year, since I've done it for the first time as a show, is now my favorite part of that show.
Yeah.
And it's the jokes, maybe because I'm not tired of telling these jokes yet, maybe because they still have room to breathe and to evolve and everything, you know, because all the other jokes are like finished and they are as they are, but these jokes still get some new tags and new pauses and new like punchlines or whatever every time I do them. But this is now like this new, like, let's say 15 minutes of my hour show is now my favorite 15 minutes of my hour show. So that's why, you know, I'm very keen to see, and that's why I'm happy to, for example, last month, I traveled to Berlin to perform with Oleg, our good friend we had on this podcast as well, and my co-organizer, co-producer in Moscow when we were in the club and everything. It's also like I see him perform twice a year now, and I get to see when, you know, I go there and I see him perform, I get to see all the new bits he's written since the last time, since in the last, say, 6 months, 8 months, or whatever, since the last time I saw him. And that's the, you know...
Is he finally good or what?
No, but he's trying really hard. But so when, you know, but when we were all in one city, in one club, we were mostly doing shows in the same club on the same stage with the same microphone in front of the same audience. So that means that I would see each joke you would write from the first time you do it up until it becomes a greatest hit. You know, all 50 times or 100 times you do it, I see out of 100, I see it 98 times you do it. And I would see how those jokes become good jokes. But now I get to see the finished product without seeing the manufacturing process. And this is something that's interesting to me because, you know, we're good friends. I know how you guys write. I know how you guys come up with jokes and stuff. And then to not see the process, but see the result is also very interesting to me because that way it can still surprise me. If I see the process, then I kind of know how, you know, I know what it is. So that's why I'm also curious to see some of your newer bits, and hopefully in the next 6 months or a year, we get to perform together again and see each other's new bits. But let's get to the show itself then. So it was 3 days ago at the time of recording, 3 days ago. What are your impressions? How satisfied are you with it? Everything. Share like your thoughts, share your feedback.
Yeah. Okay. So, well, you're probably very familiar with the whole Moscow thing where no one buys a ticket until the freaking day of the show. So you're sitting there, there's 8 tickets sold out of a 38, seater venue. And you're just thinking, oh shit, it's just going to be me and a couple of friends. That's it. Then,
I mean, my show sold out, but I see what you're talking about.
Oh, mine did too. And by the end, I had people calling up going, oh, Dave, is there any I can't, there's no chairs. They won't let me click on chairs. What does that mean? Does that mean I can't buy a ticket? Well, yeah, pretty much. You left it too late, you numbnut. So it was like, oh, for the love of God. So I had to wrangle a couple of extra chairs. And when I mean I had to wrangle, I mean I'd ask Abed, and then Abed talked to the venue and blah, blah, blah. And it was like, right, yeah, it's under your name. You'll be sitting with so-and-so just when you show up, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, right. So there, for starters, was that. The fact that advertising actually for it was done very last minute, actually. Because all these venues and places and organizations, they have their own shows beforehand. And rather than promote all of them at the same time, they kind of promote one, and then when it's done, it's the next one, and then that's done, and it's the next one. So this place, they didn't, well, they had something Thursday night, so they didn't actually, I didn't see them advertise it until the actual, I think, after that show on late Thursday night and then on Friday. So it's like, oh, for Christ's sakes, last minute. Luckily, the best promoters, I would have to say, were the actual comedians. Everybody in the crowd, Tori, Mathieu, Abed, Adrian, everyone, they promoted it on their personal Instagrams and Facebook and stuff like that. So a big, if any of you guys are listening, seriously, a big kiss and a big thank you, And the Spanish group as well, Sergey, Andres, all of them, Sergio, Natasha, they were promoting it like, hey, he's going to be doing it in English. It's not Spanish, but fine, please go see him and support him. So it was fantastic, that. So that felt, you felt the love at the end on that one. On the Friday, it was like, yes. So it was beautiful.
That's why I've actually, I can't not do it every time, but when I can, I try not to even ask about the sold tickets or attendance before the show starts, because, and especially when I was kind of in control of, you know, like booking and promotion and all of that, and you kind of look at those numbers and like the day before the show you sold 5 tickets out of 60 and you're like, oh my god, it's going to be a failure, blah blah. Then the show starts and all 60 seats are filled. You just stressed and worried over nothing, and you could have like done something productive, or at least rest and prepare for the show. So it's always, you know, it's good to keep an eye. Maybe you can do some course correction or any kind of, you know, something to boost that sale. But on the other hand, you know, more or less it kind of works out fine almost always. And it's just like checking those each sale and each ticket. It's just
I tried not to look as much as I could until like closer to the actual day sort of thing. And mainly it was Elena who was checking in, and it was then like, oh, half of it's filled. I'm like, oh, okay, good. Whew, sort of thing. So anyway, so that happened. Then the show starts. I've got my pieces of paper, which I took to the stage with me. I had 4 pieces of paper. The beginning, the first 2 were a bit more detailed. And then after that, the next 2 were actually kind of more jot point sort of stuff. I had things boxed off. So I could glance at it and see quickly where I should be. Make sure I wasn't skipping anything or wasn't forgetting particular detail. And I made sure the pages, if they finished on a pause break, so it allowed them to like have a bit of a laugh, have a bit of a thing, and then I could throw away the piece of paper.
Nice of you to write in the applause breaks into your set. That's very considerate. Very confident as well.
The fool. So I ended up so I did that, and I started, and I was nervous at the beginning because the parts that I would say that I'm the weakest at, and I'm aware of it, is the opening and the ending. I sometimes I don't have a strong enough opening, or I don't have a strong enough ending. I don't know how to finish it off without it sounding rambly. So it's like, okay, just cut it. But the beginning, the beginning is very important. It's where you set it up. So I had this kind of throwaway joke, a very basic one that I just came up with before, a little bit earlier in the day, where it was basically like, okay, there are some details that I need to explain at the beginning, because I know me. I know when I finish, I'm just going to, say thank you very much, walk off the stage, and I'll forget to mention the important details that I need to mention. So I want to mention right now, and then and my little throwaway joke was like, that's how I do. Like when I finish something, I say thank you, and I just walk off. Just ask any woman who I've had sex with. It was a very obvious, basic joke, but it got a little sort of thing. I'm like, yes, I've had a lot of one-night stands, but at least all of them said, oh, isn't he polite? He said thank you before he walked out the door. And everyone kind of went, okay, so he's making a bit of fun of himself and blah, blah, blah. That was my opener. It was a nice little quick chuckle, bang. And then I mentioned the important details I had to mention, and then I got into the set. I wasn't sure if it went smoothly, but according to everyone said it was really super fine. I didn't seem nervous at all at the beginning, and I was just going through it. And probably because, it's a greatest hits. I've done these bits a lot. For me, it's more about those links, like I said before. That's what I'm more concerned about, that I'm connecting the pieces well, that everything is well structured. I don't know about you, but when I'm performing, I find it difficult to gauge how it's going at times. Like, I'm getting chuckles, I'm getting laughs, I'm getting this, but you're wondering, like, is it as good as it seems? Especially with the audiences sometimes we get that are very kind of, more reticent sort of style. So sometimes when you're performing, I'm so focused on doing the bits or doing the act out well enough that sometimes I'm not aware what the audience is doing, sort of thing.
No, I don't have this problem because I'm funny, so I don't have laughing.
Right.
No, but the thing is, like, actually, I know what you mean. I sometimes get lost in that, especially when I don't notice, not the reaction. I notice always, like, if they're silent or they're laughing, but kind of the overall, like, how good was it, or was it? Like,
it's the degree,
mediocre, or was it great? Yeah. So I sometimes lose the kind of understanding of that. And that happened, I think, when I was doing my farewell show, because in my head, I was 2 jokes ahead. Like, I was trying not to forget the joke and thinking what's coming next. So my mouth is telling a joke. My brain is telling my mouth to tell that joke. And then the other part of my brain is in the same time simultaneously thinking of the next joke that's coming.
Yeah, and for me, it's like the links. It's like, okay, how are you linking this? How are you linking it to the next? Don't forget this. If you forget this, it won't link. It won't go smooth.
That's why I think, like, with all of that happening, I kind of my receptors and my kind of understanding of the room is
muted,
very blurry because so that's why, because I think all of my senses are trying really hard to remember everything, not to to pause, not to rush, to dictate, like to pronounce things properly, all of those things, so only those cases. But that's really when I'm kind of when I'm doing an absolutely new longer set or a show that I haven't done in that way before. So I'm kind of, my brain is 2 steps ahead of the material I'm currently doing. If I'm doing something I'm really familiar, and now that I'm doing this show that I know it, kind of, I don't have to look at the notes anymore. I don't have to look at the points of the kind of set list and everything. Now I can focus on actually feeling the audience, you know, like feeling the vibe of the room, the atmosphere, looking at people's faces, each individual person, how they're sitting, are they laughing, listen to that volume of, but this is also very, there were rooms, I did rooms where, I had a feeling that, they were just chuckling here and there. And then people told me, and I saw later on the video, because the phone was kind of in between people, that people were dying of laughter. But the sound just wasn't reaching me. Like the sound wasn't reaching me, and they would laugh a lot. But to me, I could only hear like, like very kind
muted.
of, low volume.
Everything gets muted. It's weird. When you're on stage, it's like there's like almost like a wall of like air or something that condenses it, and you get this muffled version.
But I think that's because, for example, the farewell show that I did in Brothers, and there is that big stage. You're on the big stage. The stage is the whole kind of width of the room. And then the audience, the first audience member is kind of below you and already like a meter and something away from you. I think in a cafe, that small room, you're kind of on a stage, but the stage is like 10 centimeters tall, and you're kind of in between all of those people. And this is the kind of rooms I like, because it's way easier to feel those people, because they're right next to you, And back in the day, if you remember, we did rooms like Ruin Bar, for example, where there was even no stage, and you would just stand in between people. And that's where I felt the people the most, because you would feel whatever they're feeling.
You could touch
they're
them
not comfortable,
like Jesus.
You feel the cringe. You can touch them, but don't touch audience members without immediate approval. But so I get what you're saying, and it's really hard to say during the show, maybe.
Well, in the beginning,
or maybe sometimes you kind of realize after the show.
Exactly.
As well. Like it then just comes to you like, oh, this was a great show. But in the beginning, especially. It's really hard
and that's what I mean. It took me a while, and I think it was like I did the octopus bit, and I was like, okay. And that bit, it's not probably the best. It's not the punchiest bit, but it sets up the moral. The whole moral of the story of the Australian animals, it kind of sets it up, and it carries through to the next bit. So it's sort of like something I need. It's like a bookend. So I built it up, had a little joke in there. There's a little inappropriate joke in there that I was a little bit like nervous about it. Maybe people kind of going, ugh. But I did it anyway. Got a kind of weird chuckles. Like people were like, oh my God, I can't believe you said that. I'm like, okay, that's a good one. I did it. When I did the Ninja Mum, that's when it started feeling like, all right. And I got some good reactions at it. And there were new bits that I put in there that I kind of was like, yeah, I knew it. They're new-ish. I've only done them once or twice. Because what I did is, before I did the major show, I went to every single open mic for the 2 weeks before. So altogether, and plus I also did like a special show. I was like a guest person, a guest honor person in the middle, unannounced. So I think I did about 5 or 6 like shows beforehand, and everyone gave me a bit of leeway, so I was able to do like 7 to 10 minutes each time. And in there, I did a bit that I was going to do in the show, and one that I did a couple of times was the Ninja Mum bit, and with these newer bits in there, and they just beautiful, just fit perfectly, and made it much more fun. And because it made it more fun for the audience, it makes it more fun for me. And I think that's what elevated it. And then when I did that, afterwards, when I started doing the kangaroo bit, I was much more relaxed. And even though I've done that bit 1,001 times, I did it in a much more relaxed state. I spread out the bits. I explained. I got rid of the fat, but it was still entertaining. It was nice and loose. And I think there's when I started hearing the people feeling it a bit more. So I think once I'm done with Australia...
I think that's the good thing is, and why I now put this like favorite 15 minutes of my show, I put it near the beginning. It's not my opening like I do like 5-7 minutes of other stuff, and then that goes, because I'm still kind of happy enough to tell those jokes, and it's still funny for me, entertaining for me, and that shows them that like, oh, this man loves
it energizes
jokes.
you.
He loves his job. So then like I tell these jokes, I feel good about telling these jokes, then I feel better about telling my 8-year-old jokes as well, because I'm already like riding that high, and I got the laughs and everything. And that's a good way to kind of, but I guess it's really hard to start a solo show anyways, because if you're not a household name, like if you're not a comedian that people have followed or know or paid to see, because last Fringe, when I went to see shows, like I went to see 2 different types of shows. I went to see, I think, 5 paid shows, like big shows, people like Randy Feldface, or people like David O'Doherty, people like Phil Wang, and so on. So people who are like well-known people in the industry. And then I went to see other like free Fringe or other like small kind of acts, just the circuit comedians that are doing their own like light music, everything, and then they come up and they do their hour. And the big guys, you have a big theater, you have a room full of people that know this person, they know they're funny, they paid £20 or whatever to see them, they got their seat, they dressed up, and from the first joke, people are dying of laughter. It doesn't matter if the first joke is like the weakest shit I've ever heard, it's funny, because people are like, this is gonna be funny. Oh, he told a joke, haha, it is funny. But these kind of like solo shows where it's just, an unknown comedian doing like a 2 p.m. 50-minute show, setting up the room and getting people in and explaining the bucket system or whatever, first like 15-20 minutes, always hard. Because the first 15-20 minutes is the kind of, let's build some rapport or whatever. Like, let's build some foundation, so on top of that foundation, we can build laughter and
camaraderie and all the
jokes.
rest.
Yeah, so because when you come to see a well-known, like I know Phil Wang is funny, I know why he's doing a solo show, I know why he's doing a like 2,000 people theater and not a 20 people room. That's why I'll laugh from the get-go, because we already have that like trust built up. But when I come to see random and it doesn't mean like random, I'm pretty sure 90% of the people who are on your show know you and have seen you perform before, so you are not like an unknown act to them. But it's just like, you still have to build up that momentum of the show as well.
And that was that's the other thing as well. Like you said, a lot of the people had seen me before. I was surprised. There were actually a few people who had never seen me perform. I'm like, how the hell? There was one whole table at the back, and there were a couple of extra people as well who had never seen. Or they were friends people who had seen me, they'd brought a friend and were like, this is your last chance to see him. You've never seen him before. Trust me, it's going to be good. Boom. And they dragged them. So I did actually have like a handful or so of people who had never seen before. And the other ones, what I realized was a lot of people who had seen before, they hadn't seen me in a while. And so like there were bits that like, as you know, my wife's friend, Anna, she basically, she came to the show and Anna was like, oh, that's a new bit. Oh, that's a new bit. And for her, almost half of the show was new. And Elena was like, really? No, he's been doing that bit for ages. And it's like, well, I've never seen that bit before. So either they'd forgotten it, or they'd seen certain bits, but not all of them, because after 8 years, they can't come to all of your shows. And there are bits that just happen just by happenstance. They've just never seen you perform. And they were in that part of the show. So what I found was, I don't think there was anyone, except for maybe my wife, there was no one at all who could sit there and go, well, and the comedians, there was, even then, I think there were a few of them who were like, oh yeah, there's some old bits in there I've never heard. But like, there's only like less than a handful of people, maybe one or two, who were like, I know all those bits. My wife is probably the only one who could say, I know all those bits. And even then, I tweaked them. So she was like, and you added new little bits here. That bit you did a little bit differently. It's better, this and that. So she could identify. But yeah. So for me, that was it. And it was good. By the end of it, I said, thank you very much. I had everybody, even those random people who had just come to the show were just like, oh my God, that was amazing. Like, really, that was great. I had almost everybody give me responses. And I think the best thing I found out was Abed told me after the show at the after party, he said, his girlfriend had laugh cried 3 times throughout the bit. He's like, and like she was recovering from one laugh cry, and then you got into another one. And he said, even my wife Elena admitted that there was one point where she had doubled over laughing, and she was like, I was surprised because I know all your bits. So I thought I was going to be just sitting there, legs crossed, smiling, going, he's done that well. Like more with pride rather than with any sense of actual laughter. But she goes, but seeing it in a context, and that's the other thing, doing a bit show, and I really recommend, I told Abed, I'm like, you've got to start planning out a big show because it's a different fish. It's a different feel. It's like you were saying before, it's about combine, even if it is made up of bits, it's the whole, you've got to structure those bits. It's not just, you don't just hodgepodge together. If you do it well, you've got to structure it. It is a different feeling, and the ability to build and to get that ball rolling and doing proper callbacks, not a callback to something you did 2 seconds ago. It's a proper callback where you reference something from way back in the show that people go, oh my God, yes! And you get a secondary laugh because you get that recognition laugh plus the actual joke laugh. It's different.
Yeah, I mean, this is something that Seinfeld talks about a lot, because he says that he always does, when he does a show, he does like 70% or 60% new material, but like 30-40% old jokes that everyone knows. But it is like going to a concert and hearing your band play that favorite song of yours that you've known for like 20 years. People still, or even if they've heard these jokes before and it was funny then, they'll still laugh again because they're like, I know this joke, it's a funny one, and they laugh maybe even more than the first time because now they're familiar with it and they can actually kind of enjoy it, and and especially if it's like fine-tuned and evolved and being upgraded since then they can laugh at the same thing again, but more because it's a new thing now. So, now that you've done the show, now that the impressions have settled a bit and a few days passed, and hopefully you have a recording of that. Maybe you had a chance to rewatch it already, or you definitely will.
Not yet, but I have got a recording. It's in process being made.
Okay, perfect. So what is some kind of summary, conclusion? How would you, what is your final thought?
Well, my final thoughts, it depends. For myself, it was fun. I really enjoyed doing it. I would like to do it more often. Maybe, I think after doing it now, I think I feel a bit more ready to maybe try to do something like Edinburgh Fringe, like an actual, with my own special, like really kind of like, no, I want to structure it. I want to have 50 minutes that you usually get, 50 or so. So I want to do my own 50 minutes. 55 minutes. And really feel it, because it is a new kettle of fish. And what I would recommend for comedians, any comedians listening, is if you haven't already done an actual special, if you've been doing it for, I would say, maybe 6+ years, like make sure you have enough material, give it a shot. Like really start thinking about it, collecting your bits together and getting that through line. I think what really did help me was, even though they're still blocks, but they're big blocks with a common thread that you can do, and working on the links, because it's like writing a story, getting the whole beginning, middle, and conclusion sort of thing like that. So I would really go with that. And for everyone else who's just listening for the sake of listening, hopefully you can check me out on my YouTube channel, Mr. Aramis Bungle, MrAramisBungle, and I hope that within the next month or two I will post up the actual whole thing. Name it David Munoz Greatest Hits Volume 1, and it'll be up there so that everyone can watch it and enjoy it, I hope. Yeah.
We will also promote it probably through all of our social media as well. So for the fans or followers of this podcast to also have some access to your show, actually, and they can see you in action, because we've been talking about comedy for, I think, around 2 years now. We've been doing this podcast, but it would be a great opportunity for the listeners to actually see one of us at least, and I hope to put up my show, or at least a part of that show, after Fringe as well, so they would be able to see us in action as well. But if you are listening to this, and if you like our podcast but you haven't already liked and followed us on different social media, you can find us on Facebook, on Twitter, on YouTube, on Threads.
Yes, we're on Threads now. Oh my God, we've upgraded. We're the avant-garde. We're the people at the front. Yeah, that's right. We're breaking barriers, baby.
We're the pioneers. So yeah, follow us and leave a like, share us with a friend, and keep listening to the Comedy Kiosk.
Good night. Ciao.
Thank you and goodbye.